The exiled princess Zarathel stood at the edge of the crystalline platform, watching the last transport ship disappear into the swirling purple clouds of Keth Moran's atmosphere. The weight of her father's final words still echoed in her mind like a death sentence. "You have brought shame to our bloodline. You are no longer welcome in this realm." The Keth Moran royal family had ruled the galaxy's most powerful empire for over 3,000 years. Their blue-scaled skin and towering 8-foot frames commanded respect from countless species across 70 star systems. But Zarathel had committed the ultimate sin in her father's eyes. She had shown mercy to their enemies. During the recent war with the Terran Federation, she had secretly provided medical supplies to human prisoners of war. When Emperor Vexthor discovered her actions, his rage was unlike anything the palace had ever witnessed. The golden eyes that marked their royal bloodline had burned with fury as he stripped her of her titles, her inheritance, and her home. Now she stood alone on the abandoned mining station of Zirian 7, a forgotten outpost on the edge of neutral space. Her father had left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small survival kit. The station's artificial gravity generators hummed weakly, threatening to fail at any moment. Dust particles floated through the stale air, and the emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the corroded metal walls. Zarathel had never known hunger, never experienced true solitude. In the palace, servants had attended to her every need. Now she rummaged through empty supply crates, finding only scraps of expired rations and contaminated water filters. Her royal robes, once pristine and shimmering, were already torn from catching on exposed metal edges. The princess tried to access the station's communication array, hoping to contact sympathetic allies within the empire. But her father had been thorough in his exile. Her genetic signature had been removed from all royal databases. Her biometric codes were worthless. To the galaxy's communication networks, Princess Zarathel no longer existed. Fear crept into her mind as she realized the true gravity of her situation. This mining station was an uncharted space, far from any major shipping lanes. The life support systems were clearly failing, and she had no way to repair them. Without help, she would die alone on this forgotten piece of metal floating in the void. She spent her first night huddled in the station's control room, listening to the concerning sounds of dying machinery. The temperature was dropping steadily, and her breath formed small clouds in the increasingly cold air. Through the cracked observation window, she could see the distant stars that had once been part of her father's empire. Now they seemed impossibly far away, like watching her former life through a barrier she could never cross again. The princess had always prided herself on her intelligence and diplomatic skills. She spoke 14 languages fluently and had studied the customs of dozens of alien species. But none of that knowledge helped her repair a failing oxygen recycler or find food in an abandoned facility. Her royal education had prepared her for negotiations and state dinners, not survival. As she drifted into an uneasy sleep, Zarathel wondered if her act of compassion had been worth this terrible price. The human prisoners she had helped were probably safe now, returned to their families and their lives. But she was paying for their salvation with her own life. The irony was not lost on her. She who had shown mercy to humans might now die, because no one would show mercy to her. Her dreams were filled with memories of the palace gardens, where exotic plants from across the empire grew in carefully maintained environments. She remembered the taste of Miran fruit from the crystal orchards of Alaxis Prime, the sound of her tutors' voices as they taught her about quantum mechanics and interstellar law. All of that was gone now, as if it had never existed. When she woke the next morning, frost covered the control panels. The life support systems had degraded further during the night, and she calculated that she had perhaps 3 days of breathable air remaining. She tried not to think about what would happen after that. Instead, she focused on exploring every inch of the station, hoping to find something, anything, that might extend her life a few more hours. The mining equipment was too complex for her to operate, even if it had been functional. The communication array remained stubbornly silent despite her attempts to repair it with basic tools. She found herself talking aloud just to hear a voice, even if it was her own. The silence of space was more oppressive than any prison cell. By the end of her second day, exhaustion was setting in. The meager rations she had found were nearly gone, and the water recycler was producing liquid that tasted increasingly metallic. She sat in the observation deck, watching the stars and trying to make peace with her fate. Perhaps this was how all stories of rebellion ended. Not with glory or vindication, but with quiet defeat in the darkness between worlds. She thought about the human prisoners she had helped, wondering if they even knew her name or understood the sacrifice she had made. They were probably living normal lives now, unaware that their freedom had cost an alien princess everything she had ever known. There was something poetic about that, she supposed. Her last act of royal power had been to give others the very thing she could never have again, the chance to go home. The station shuddered around her as another system failed somewhere in its depths. Time was running out, and Princess Zarathel found herself hoping that when death came, it would be quick and peaceful. She had lived her entire life surrounded by others, and the thought of dying alone in the cold vacuum of space filled her with a sadness deeper than any physical pain. Little did she know that help was already on its way, carried aboard a small merchant vessel whose human captain had heard stories of her kindness from the very prisoners she had saved. The universe, it seemed, had not forgotten the exiled princess after all. #An unexpected rescue. Captain Marcus Chun had been running cargo between frontier worlds for 15 years, but he had never carried a passenger quite like the one sitting in his ship's medical bay. When his sensors had detected the faint life signs aboard the derelict mining station, he had almost ignored them. Salvage operations in neutral space were usually more trouble than they were worth. But something had compelled him to investigate, and now he was glad he had trusted that instinct. The alien woman was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her blue-scaled skin shimmered with an inner light, and even unconscious from hypothermia and starvation, she carried herself with an unmistakable dignity. When she had first opened her golden eyes and looked at him, Marcus had felt like he was staring into the face of royalty, which, as it turned out, he was. "My name is Zarathel of the House of Kethmore," she had whispered in accented but perfect standard, her voice barely audible over the hum of his ship's engines. I was the daughter of Emperor Vexthor." Marcus had nearly choked on his coffee. Every human in the galaxy knew that name. Emperor Vexthor controlled the largest and most powerful alien empire humanity had ever encountered. His fleets had fought brutal wars against the Terran Federation for decades. The idea that his daughter was now sitting in Marcus's cramped medical bay, wrapped in spare blankets, and sipping synthesized broth was almost too surreal to believe. "What happened to you?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair across from her. His ship, the Wandering Star, was designed for cargo, not passengers, but he had done his best to make her comfortable in the small medical compartment. Zarathel was quiet for a long moment, staring at the metal bulkhead as if she could see through it to the stars beyond. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of loss that Marcus recognized. He had heard that same tone in the voices of war refugees and displaced colonists. "I defied my father," she said simply. "During the last conflict with your people, I discovered that Kethmoran forces were mistreating human prisoners. They were denied medical care, adequate food, basic dignity. I could not stand by and watch such cruelty, regardless of politics or war." Marcus leaned forward, interested despite himself. The treatment of human prisoners had been one of the most contentious issues in the recent peace negotiations. "So you helped them?" "I provided medical supplies and food to the prison camps in secret. I ensured that wounded prisoners received proper treatment. I may have influenced certain guards to show more mercy than their orders demanded." She looked up at Marcus, her golden eyes reflecting the soft lighting of the medical bay. "When my father discovered what I had done, he declared that I had betrayed my own species. He stripped me of my titles and exiled me to that mining station to die." The casual way she spoke about sacrificing everything for the sake of enemy prisoners struck Marcus deeply. He had served in the Terran Defense Forces during the war and had seen firsthand how most Kethmorans treated human captives. The idea that this alien princess had risked everything to show compassion to his people was almost incomprehensible. "How long were you on that station?" he asked. 3 days. Perhaps 4. Time became difficult to measure. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I had accepted that I would die there. When I saw your ship approaching, I thought I was hallucinating from oxygen deprivation. Marcus studied her face, noting the subtle signs of dehydration and malnutrition that were only now beginning to fade. Why did you do it? Help the prisoners. I mean, you had to know the risks. Zarathel considered the question carefully. My tutors always taught me that true nobility comes not from birth or title, but from how one treats those who have no power to help or harm them. Your prisoners were defenseless. They were suffering. In that moment, their humanity mattered more than their species or the politics of our governments. Their humanity, Marcus repeated, struck by her choice of words. Most of your people don't even acknowledge that humans are truly sentient. Most of my people have never taken the time to observe humans closely. I have. She gestured weakly toward Marcus. You stopped to investigate a derelict station despite the danger and expense. You are providing aid to someone who should be your enemy. You ask questions about suffering rather than celebrating victory. These are not the actions of a mere animal or a lesser species. Marcus felt something shift in his perception of the galaxy. He had spent years believing that the Kethmoran Empire was uniformly hostile to human life. The existence of someone like Zarathel suggested that reality was far more complex than the war propaganda had indicated. What will you do now, he asked. I mean, you can't go home, and I doubt the Terran Federation would exactly welcome the daughter of their greatest enemy with open arms. Zarathel's laugh was bitter, but not unkind. I have given this much thought during my recovery aboard your ship. I am no longer welcome in Kethmoran space, and, as you note, human space would likely prove equally inhospitable. I suppose I must make a new life in the frontier territories, among the independent colonies and free traders. That's not exactly an easy life, Marcus warned. The frontier can be brutal, especially for someone without connections or resources. No offense, but royal education doesn't usually prepare you for life as a refugee. None taken. I am well aware of my limitations. She looked around the small medical bay with something approaching appreciation. However, I do possess certain skills that might prove valuable. I speak many languages, understand the customs of numerous species, and have extensive knowledge of interstellar law and trade regulations. Perhaps I can find work as a translator or cultural consultant. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering possibilities. His own life had been one of constant movement between worlds, carrying cargo and passengers wherever profit could be found. It was a lonely existence, but it had its freedoms. The idea of having a permanent crew member, especially one with Zarathel's unique background, was tempting. I might have another option for you, he said carefully. I could use a partner in this business. Someone who understands alien cultures and can help negotiate better deals with non-human clients. The work wouldn't be glamorous, and the pay would be inconsistent, but it would be honest. Zarathel's eyes widened with surprise. You would trust me aboard your ship permanently? Despite my heritage? Your heritage is exactly why you'd be valuable, Marcus replied. Look, I've been running this route alone for 15 years. I've lost more deals than I can count because I didn't understand some alien custom or insulted a client without realizing it. Having someone who actually knows how to navigate those waters would be incredibly useful. But I'm still technically an enemy of your government. Harboring me could bring you legal troubles. Marcus shrugged. The Terran Federation barely has jurisdiction out here anyway. Besides, from what I've heard, you're probably more human than half the politicians back on Earth. He stood up and extended his hand. What do you say, partner? Zarathel stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, as if she couldn't quite believe what was being offered. Slowly, she reached out and grasped it with her own scaled fingers. Her grip was surprisingly strong despite her recent ordeal. I accept your offer, Captain Shun. Though I should warn you that I have much to learn about the practical aspects of interstellar commerce. We'll figure it out together, Marcus said with a grin. Besides, how hard can it be to teach an alien princess how to haggle with cargo brokers? As it turned out, the answer to that question would surprise them both. But that was a lesson for another day. For now, it was enough that a human captain and an exiled Kethmoran princess had found common ground among the stars, bound together by mutual respect and the simple recognition that compassion could bridge any gap between worlds. #learning to be human 6 months after her rescue. Princess Zarathel had become simply Zara to her human partner, and she was discovering that life aboard a cargo freighter was far more complex than royal tutors had ever imagined. The Wandering Star had become her new home, its cramped corridors and humming machinery as familiar now as the crystal halls of her father's palace had once been. No, 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 Marcus said, shaking his head as he watched Zura attempt to negotiate with a Rigelian merchant on the cargo dock of Freeport Station. You're being too polite. Rigelians respect directness. If you keep using formal courtesy phrases, he's going to think you're weak. Zara stepped back from the three-armed alien trader, frustration evident in the set of her shoulders. But, according to my diplomatic training, excessive directness with Rigelians is considered insulting to their intelligence. Your diplomatic training was for dealing with Rigelian ambassadors and government officials, Marcus pointed out. This guy is a freelance cargo broker who probably learned standard by watching entertainment feeds. Different rules apply. The distinction was one of many that Zara was slowly learning. Royal protocol had prepared her for formal interactions with alien dignitaries, but the frontier operated by completely different social codes. Here, a firm handshake meant more than a ceremonial bow, and the ability to laugh at oneself was more valuable than perfect grammar. She watched Marcus take over the negotiation, his casual manner and easy humor quickly winning over the Rigelian broker. Within 10 minutes, he had secured a cargo contract that would have taken Zara hours to arrange through formal channels. The frustrating part was that she could see her mistakes clearly now, but breaking decades of ingrained royal behavior was proving incredibly difficult. You're improving, Marcus assured her as they walked back to the ship, their footsteps echoing through the station's metal corridors. 3 months ago, you would have spent 20 minutes on introductory pleasantries before even mentioning cargo. Today you got straight to business. And still managed to nearly lose the contract, Zara replied, her tone dry but not bitter. She had learned that humans appreciated self-deprecating humor, though it had taken her weeks to understand why deliberately undermining one's own dignity could be socially advantageous. Their partnership had developed into something neither of them had expected. Marcus had anticipated that Zara's royal background would make her demanding or imperious, but she had proven to be surprisingly adaptable. She took on the mundane tasks of ship maintenance without complaint, learned to operate cargo handling equipment, and even attempted to cook human food with varying degrees of success. For her part, Zara was continually amazed by human resilience and ingenuity. Marcus could repair complex machinery with improvised parts, navigate bureaucratic obstacles through persistence and charm, and find profit opportunities that more sophisticated traders overlooked. He had built his entire livelihood through careful planning and hard work, without the benefit of inherited wealth or political connections. "I've been thinking about something," Zara said as they prepared the ship for departure from Freeport Station. She was monitoring the cargo bay's environmental systems, while Marcus handled the pre-flight checklist, a division of labor that had evolved naturally over their months together. "What's that?" "The humans you work with, they treat you as an equal despite your relatively modest resources and lack of political influence. In Kethmoran society, social status is largely determined by one's family bloodline and accumulated wealth. But here, respect seems based more on competence and character." Marcus paused in his checklist, considering her observation. "I guess that's true, though I've never really thought about it that way. Out here on the frontier, nobody cares who your parents were if you can't do the job. Results matter more than pedigree. It is a remarkably egalitarian system," Zara mused, "though it does require individuals to prove themselves constantly, which can be exhausting." "Speaking from experience?" Marcus asked with a grin. "Indeed, I have never worked so hard in my life, nor learned so much so quickly." She gestured around the cargo bay, which was now loaded with agricultural equipment bound for a struggling colony world. 6 months ago, I could not have told you the difference between a plasma welder and a gravity manipulator. Now I can operate both and perform basic maintenance on either." Their conversation was interrupted by an incoming communication from the station's traffic control. "Merchant Vessel Wandering Star, you have a priority message from the Terran Federation Diplomatic Corps. Please respond on Secure Channel 7. Marcus and Zara exchanged glances. Official contact from the Federation was unusual for an independent trader, and rarely brought good news. Marcus activated the secure channel with some trepidation. The holographic image of a middle-aged human woman in Federation uniform materialized above the communication console. Captain Shun, I am Commander Sarah Liu from the Diplomatic Corps. We need to speak with you and your passenger regarding a matter of galactic importance. Zara is not a passenger anymore, Marcus replied carefully. She's my business partner. What can we do for the Federation? Commander Liu's expression remained neutral, but Zara caught a flicker of surprise in her eyes. I see. Captain, we have received intelligence that former Princess Zurathel of the Kethmoran Empire is traveling aboard your vessel. Given recent political developments, we need to discuss her status and potential value to Federation interests. Zara stepped into the hologram's field of view, her posture automatically straightening into the regal bearing that royal training had ingrained in her. Commander Liu, I am Zurathel, though I should point out that I no longer hold any royal titles or political authority within the Kethmoran Empire. That may be changing, Commander Liu said. 3 days ago, Emperor Vex Thor died suddenly of a rare neurological condition. The succession has created a power vacuum within the Empire, and various faction leaders are positioning themselves to claim the throne. Several of these factions have been making inquiries about your whereabouts. The news hit Zara like a physical blow. Whatever complicated feelings she harbored toward her father, he had been the only family she had ever known. Learning of his death through a Federation diplomat, months after the fact, drove home just how completely she had been cut off from her former life. Marcus moved closer to her, offering silent support. What does this mean for us? He asked the commander. It means that Zarathel has suddenly become a very valuable commodity, Liu replied bluntly. Some factions want her dead to eliminate any potential rival claims. Others want to use her as a figurehead to legitimize their own rule. The Federation, naturally, has its own interests in how this situation resolves. And what exactly are those interests? Zara asked, her voice carefully controlled despite the emotional turmoil she was experiencing. Commander Liu leaned forward slightly. We need someone with intimate knowledge of Kethmoran politics and culture who can help us navigate the succession crisis. Someone who understands the various faction leaders and their motivations. In return, we can offer protection and resources. Zara was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. She could feel Marcus watching her, waiting for her decision without trying to influence it. The choice was hers alone to make. Commander Liu, she said finally, I appreciate the Federation's offer, but I must decline. I have no desire to return to the political intrigues of my former life, regardless of which faction might benefit from my involvement. Miss Zarathel, with respect, you may not have a choice. The moment your location becomes known, you will be targeted by multiple parties. The safest place for you is under Federation protection. Perhaps, Zara acknowledged, but safety purchased through political manipulation is just another form of prison. I have found freedom here among the merchant crews and frontier colonies. I would rather face danger as a free individual than security as a political pawn. Marcus stepped forward. Commander, we appreciate the warning about the succession crisis, but Zara's made her choice and I support it. If anyone comes looking for her, they'll have to go through me first. Commander Liu's expression suggested she thought Marcus was being naive about the forces now arrayed against them. Captain, these are not common criminals or petty pirates we're discussing. Kethmoran intelligence operatives and Imperial faction leaders have resources that far exceed anything an independent trader can handle. Maybe so, Marcus replied, but humans have a funny way of surprising people who underestimate us. And Zara's one of us now, which means she's not alone in this. As the communication ended and the Wandering Star departed Freeport Station, both partners knew their simple life as cargo haulers was about to become far more complicated. But they also knew something else. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by a partnership forged in mutual respect and trust that transcended the boundaries of species and politics. #The hunt begins the attack came without warning as the Wandering Star approached the shipping lanes near Kepler Station. Marcus was reviewing cargo manifests when the proximity alarm screamed through the ship's corridors, followed immediately by the harsh whine of energy weapons striking their hull. Kethmoran pursuit ships, 3 of them, Zara called from the sensor station, her fingers dancing across the alien control interfaces they had jury-rigged to accommodate her unique physiology. Military-grade, but not Imperial Navy. The transponder codes identify them as belonging to House Veltar. Marcus was already strapping into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls as he pushed their cargo hauler's engines to maximum output. "Friends of yours?" "Hardly," Zara replied, her voice grim as she monitored their attackers' approach vectors. "House Veltar has been my father's primary rival for decades. They were always the most vocal supporters of the war against humanity. If they have come for me, it is not to offer condolences on my father's passing." The ship shuddered as another energy blast found its mark, overloading one of their secondary power relays. Warning lights flashed across the control panels, and Marcus could hear the concerning sound of strained engines as he demanded more speed than their old freighter was designed to provide. "Can we outrun them?" Zara asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Not a chance. Those are military interceptors, and we're hauling 40 tons of farming equipment." Marcus's jaw was tight with concentration as he tried to squeeze every ounce of performance from their ship. "Our only advantage is that they want you alive, so they won't risk destroying the whole ship. That advantage may not last long if I continue to resist capture," Zara pointed out. "Perhaps I should surrender myself. There is no reason for you to die for my mistakes." "Not happening," Marcus said firmly. "We're partners, remember? Besides, I've got a few tricks these Imperial bastards haven't seen yet." He activated the ship's emergency beacon while simultaneously dumping their cargo bay contents into space. 40 tons of agricultural machinery suddenly filled the area between the Wandering Star and their pursuers, creating a debris field that forced the Kethmoran ships to reduce speed and maneuver carefully around the scattered equipment. "Clever," Zara acknowledged, "but that will only delay them by a few minutes." "A few minutes might be enough," Marcus replied, changing course toward a dense asteroid field that lay just beyond Kepler Station's navigation buoys. "The distress beacon will bring help, but we need to stay alive long enough for it to arrive." The asteroid field was a graveyard of shattered planetoids, the result of some ancient cosmic collision that had left the space around Kepler Station littered with rocky debris. Most ships avoided the area due to the navigation hazards, but Marcus had run these routes for years and knew the safer passages through the field. Behind them, the Kethmoran ships were closing the gap despite the obstacle course of farming equipment. Their weapons systems were charging for another salvo, the energy signatures showing clearly on Zara sensor displays. "Incoming transmission from the lead ship," she reported. "Let's hear what they have to say," Marcus said, activating the communication array. The holographic image of a tall Kethmoran warrior appeared above their console. His scales were darker than Zara's, almost black, and ritual scars covered his face in patterns that spoke of high military rank. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "I am War Commander Fexmol of House Veltar. You are harboring the criminal known as Zara Thel, who stands accused of treason against the Kethmoran Empire. Surrender her immediately, and you will be permitted to depart unharmed." "Criminal?" Zara's voice was sharp with indignation. "I was exiled by lawful Imperial decree. I have committed no crimes under Kethmoran law. Your exile was the mercy of a weak emperor," Fexmol replied coldly. "The New Order has different standard of justice. Your crimes against our people during the human war demand a more permanent solution." Marcus cut the communication link before Zara could respond. "So much for negotiation. Looks like they're not planning to take you back for a trial. House Veltar has always favored direct solutions to political problems," Zara said quietly. "If they have gained significant power during the succession crisis, my continued existence represents a threat to their legitimacy." The first asteroid loomed ahead of them, a tumbling mountain of rock and ice that cast shifting shadows across their flight path. Marcus threaded the Wandering Star through the narrow gap between two rotating masses, using their gravitational pull to alter course without burning extra fuel. Behind them, the Kethmoran ships spread out in pursuit formation, their superior maneuverability allowing them to follow despite the hazardous terrain. "They're gaining on us," Zara observed, watching the tactical display as their pursuers close the distance. "Their ships are designed for combat in complex environments like this." "Then, we need to even the odds," Marcus said, activating a set of controls that Zara had never seen him use before. Hidden weapons systems emerged from concealed ports along the ship's hull, transforming their humble cargo hauler into something altogether more dangerous. "Marcus," Zara said slowly, "exactly what kind of cargo have you been hauling all these years?" "The legal kind, mostly," he replied with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But a smart trader always has contingency plans. These modifications aren't strictly Federation standard, but they're not technically illegal either." The first Kethmoran interceptor rounded a large asteroid and found itself staring down the barrel of a military-grade plasma cannon. Marcus's shot took the enemy ship completely by surprise, overloading its shields and forcing it to break off pursuit for emergency repairs. "To left," Zara said, her voice filled with new respect for her partner's hidden capabilities. "Though they will be more cautious now that they know we are armed." The remaining pursuers had indeed learned from their companion's mistake. They approached from different angles, using the asteroid field's cover to mask their movements. Energy bolts streaked past the wandering star as the chase continued deeper into the debris field, each near miss sending vibrations through the ship's hull. There, Zara pointed to a cluster of particularly dense asteroids ahead of them. "That formation looks unstable. If we could destabilize it at the right moment." Marcus saw what she was suggesting and nodded grimly. "It's risky. If we miscalculate the timing, we'll be caught in the collapse ourselves." "Better to die attempting escape than to be executed as a traitor," Zara replied. Marcus adjusted their course toward the unstable cluster while Zara calculated the optimal firing solution. The Kethmoran ships followed, closing in for what they clearly believed would be the final engagement. At the last possible moment, Marcus fired a sustained burst from their plasma cannon into the connecting stress points between the asteroids. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Millions of tons of rock broke free from their gravitational moorings, creating a cascade collapse that filled the space behind them with tumbling debris. One of the pursuing ships was caught directly in the avalanche, its hull crushed by impacts it had no chance to avoid. The other managed to escape the immediate destruction, but was forced to retreat to a safe distance. Its pursuit effectively ended. As they cleared the asteroid field and approached the safety of Kepler Station's defense perimeter, Marcus and Zara began to receive the first responses to their distress beacon. 3 Terran Federation patrol ships were already moving to intercept any remaining threats, while station security was scrambling additional units to provide escort. "We made it," Marcus said, allowing himself to relax for the first time since the attack began. "This time," Zara replied, her golden eyes fixed on the long-range sensors that showed more ships moving in the deeper reaches of space. "But House Veltar will not give up so easily. Today's failure will only make them more determined to eliminate me. Then, we'll have to make sure they never get another chance like this," Marcus said. "It's time to stop running and start fighting back." Zara looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean that hiding among the cargo routes isn't working anymore. If House Veltar wants a war, maybe it's time to give them one they'll never forget." Marcus's expression was harder than Zara had ever seen it before. "Besides, I'm getting tired of people shooting at my ship." As they docked at Kepler Station under the protection of Federation forces, both partners knew that their lives as simple merchants were over. The galaxy's political upheaval had found them despite their efforts to remain neutral, and the choices they made in the coming days would determine not just their own survival, but possibly the fate of billions of beings across the contested sectors of space. The hunt had begun, but the hunters were about to discover that humans and their allies could be far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. Hashtag the price of compassion. 3 years had passed since that desperate chase through the asteroid field near Kepler Station, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. What had begun as a simple rescue mission aboard the wandering star had evolved into something much larger, a coalition of unlikely allies united by the belief that compassion was stronger than conquest. Zara stood on the observation deck of the Federation flagship New Horizon, watching as the combined fleets of a dozen species prepared for what historians would later call the Battle of Redemption. Human vessels flew in formation with reformed Kethmoran ships, their crews working together with a harmony that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. The sight still amazed her, though she had been instrumental in making it happen. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. He wore the uniform of a Federation commander now, though he still maintained his merchant captain's practical attitude toward military protocol. Terrified, Zara admitted honestly. When I helped those human prisoners escape, I never imagined it would lead to this. She gestured toward the massive fleet arrayed before them. All of this death and struggle just because I could not stand to watch suffering. You saved more than those prisoners, Marcus reminded her. You saved the idea that different species can coexist peacefully. That's worth fighting for. The past 3 years have been a whirlwind of political maneuvering and military action. House Veltar had indeed seized control of the Kethmoran Empire after Emperor Vextor's death, but their rule was built on oppression and fear. Other alien species had watched with growing alarm as the new imperial government began expanding its territory through brutal conquest rather than the complex diplomacy that had maintained galactic stability for centuries. Zara's knowledge of Kethmoran politics and culture had proven invaluable to the Federation's diplomatic efforts. She had helped identify moderate elements within the Empire who opposed House Veltar's extremism, and her broadcast to her former people had sparked uprisings across several star systems. More importantly, her partnership with Marcus had become a symbol of interspecies cooperation that inspired others to bridge the gaps between their worlds. Princess Zarathel, please report to the command center, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. She was still getting used to having her royal title restored, though it now carried very different meanings than it once had. The command center was a hive of activity as the final preparations for battle were completed. Admiral Johnson, the human commander of the combined fleets, looked up as Zara and Marcus entered. Beside him stood General Korvax, a Kethmoran military leader who had defected from House Veltar's forces 6 months earlier. We've received a final communication from War Commander Thexmol, Admiral Johnson said without preamble. He's demanding your surrender in exchange for safe passage for all Federation and Allied forces. He claims that ending your corrupting influence will restore order to the galaxy. Zara laughed, a sound that held no humor. Thexmol believes that I'm the source of House Veltar's problems, but he fails to understand the real issue. The galaxy has changed, and his vision of Kethmoran's supremacy belongs to a dead past. He's got a point, though, General Korvax said reluctantly. Your presence here is what's holding this coalition together. If something happens to you in the coming battle, then you'll continue the fight without me, Zara said firmly. The principles we're defending don't depend on any single individual. Marcus taught me that lesson years ago when he showed me that respect is earned through actions, not inherited through bloodlines. Marcus squeezed her shoulder supportively. Besides, Zara's not going anywhere. We've come too far together to give up now. The battle began 3 hours later as House Veltar's Imperial fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. Their ships were massive and imposing, black holes decorated with the golden symbols of their house. For a moment, even the experienced Federation officers felt a chill of fear at the sight of such overwhelming military power. But the coalition forces had advantages that pure military might couldn't overcome. The crews had trained together for months, learning to coordinate their diverse technologies and tactics. More importantly, they were fighting for something they believed in rather than out of obligation or fear. The engagement began with long-range exchanges between the largest ships, beams of energy crossing the void like deadly lightning. The New Horizon shuddered under the impact of Kethmoran plasma cannons, but her shields held as human fighters swarmed around the enemy capital ships like angry insects. Zara had insisted on taking an active role in the battle despite her lack of formal military training. She coordinated communications between the various species in the coalition, her linguistic skills and cultural knowledge allowing her to relay orders and tactical information more efficiently than any translation system. The Rigelian squadron is having trouble with the Imperial formation tactics, she reported to Admiral Johnson. They're requesting permission to fall back and regroup. Negative, the Admiral replied. Tell them to switch to harassment pattern Delta, and remind them that we're not trying to match the Empire's ship for ship. We're trying to break their discipline. It was a lesson that Marcus had learned in his years as an independent trader. Sometimes the best way to defeat a larger opponent was to force them to fight on your terms rather than theirs. The coalition forces used their superior coordination and flexibility to avoid direct confrontations, instead focusing on disrupting the Imperial fleet's formation and supply lines. The turning point came when General Korvax led a strike force of defected Kethmoran ships against House Veltar's command vessel. His knowledge of Imperial tactics allowed the strike team to penetrate the enemy's defensive screen and deliver a crippling blow to their flagship's engines. War Commander Thexmol is demanding to speak with you, the communications officer reported as the Imperial fleet began to show signs of disarray. Zara looked at Admiral Johnson, who nodded his approval. The holographic image of the Kethmoran warrior appeared above the command center's communication array, his dark scales now bearing fresh scars from the battle. Zarathel, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of rage and grudging respect. You have corrupted our people with your human ideas of equality and cooperation. Look what your compassion has cost us. Kethmoran fighting against Kethmoran, the Empire divided against itself. The Empire divided itself. Thexmol, Zara replied calmly. I merely provided an alternative to your vision of eternal warfare. The Kethmoran people are choosing their own path now, free from the fear that you and my father used to control them. This is not over, traitor. Even if you win today, there will always be those who remember the old ways. Perhaps, Zara acknowledged, but there will also be those who remember that Kethmoran and human, Rigelian, and Vulcan can work together for something greater than any single species could achieve alone. That memory will outlast your empire. The communication ended as Thexmol's flagship began to retreat, taking what remained of his fleet with him. Around the command center, cheers erupted as the coalition forces celebrated their victory. But Zara felt no joy, only a deep sadness for all the lives that had been lost in the pursuit of an ideal that should have been simple common sense. Later, as the fleets began their return to their respective home systems, Marcus found Zara in her quarters aboard the New Horizon. She was staring out at the stars, her golden eyes reflecting the distant light of other worlds. Regrets? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. Many, she said quietly. I think about those human prisoners I helped so long ago, and I wonder if they ever imagined that their freedom would cost so much. Was it worth it, Marcus? All this death and destruction just to prove that different species can show kindness to each other. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering her question. You know what I think? I think those prisoners would be proud of what their rescue led to. Not because of the battles we fought, but because of the peace we've made possible. He gestured toward the viewport, where ships from a dozen different worlds were coordinating their departure routes with a cooperation that had been unthinkable just a few years earlier. Look at them, Zara. Look at what you helped create. Former enemies working together, sharing technology and resources, building something better than what came before. The price was so high, Zara whispered. The price of hatred was higher, Marcus replied. Your father's empire was built on the idea that one species was superior to all others. That led to centuries of war and suffering. What you've helped build is based on the idea that every life has value, regardless of which world it comes from. Zara leaned back in her chair, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. When I was a child, my tutors taught me that a ruler's greatest responsibility was to protect their people from external threats. I never considered that sometimes the greatest threat comes from our own inability to see the humanity in others. Speaking of which, Marcus said with a grin, the Federation Council has officially offered you the position of interspecies diplomatic coordinator. They want you to help establish permanent cultural exchange programs between all the coalition worlds. A bureaucrat, Zara said with mock horror. How the mighty have fallen. Hey, it's better than being a wanted fugitive, Marcus pointed out. Besides, someone needs to make sure all these different species keep talking to each other instead of shooting at each other. You're the obvious choice for the job. Zara smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness she had shown since the battle ended. Will you be my deputy coordinator? I seem to recall that we work well together. Wouldn't miss it, Marcus replied. Though I have to warn you, I'm still not great with formal diplomatic protocol. Neither am I, apparently, Zara laughed. But perhaps that's exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Diplomats who care more about results than procedures. As a New Horizon jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward a future that neither could have imagined when they first met aboard a dying mining station. Both partners knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. The galaxy was vast and full of species that had yet to learn the lesson they had discovered together. That compassion was not a weakness to be exploited, but a strength that could overcome any obstacle. The exiled princess and the human captain had found more than just friendship among the stars. They had found a purpose that would guide them for the rest of their lives. And in a galaxy still learning to heal from centuries of conflict, that purpose was exactly what the universe needed most.